Welcome to Home Business TV. Welcome to the Home Business Podcast. I'm Richard Kevin, your host. Couple-Preneurs. If you are running a home-based business and living with your significant other, married or otherwise, chances are you are both couple-preneurs. It's tough to keep business and pleasure totally separate. To meet this challenge, we are joined today by Kyle and Ariel Tresch, who are the founders of a mentorship company appropriately named Couple-Preneurs. So welcome, Kyle and Ariel Tresch, to the Home Business Podcast. How are you couple-preneurs doing today?
We're doing good, Richard. Thank you for having us. We're excited to be here.
Thank you so much. And for everybody who is listening, if you own a business, you work from home, and you either work with your significant other or one day have a dream to work together with your significant other, I believe you're about to hear some things you've never heard before.
Great. Kyle and Ariel equip other entrepreneurial couples with strategies to grow in business without growing apart in the process. They will help you discover how to turn your working dynamic as a couple into your ultimate competitive advantage in business. First, let's get to know you better. Kyle and Ariel, how did you end up as the foremost leading gurus in the subject of couple-preneur relationships?
Yeah. So, when most couples get married, like what that phase is after their wedding, right? It's the
Well, they call it the
phase.
honeymoon bliss.
Yeah. Yeah, right. Exactly. And for us, we had what we now like lovingly call the anti-honeymoon phase. So when Kyle and I got married, we both kind of fell into this anti-honeymoon phase, so to speak, where we kind of jumped back into our businesses and immediately started neglecting our relationship. So for us personally, we both came from pretty humble beginnings. We grew up in a small town in Ohio. We actually both had separate businesses. Kyle was a digital marketing consultant. I had.
Wait, are you high school sweethearts?
Not exactly. We knew each other in high school. We actually dated in middle school.
But she broke up with me 4 months later. So, it was one of those things. So it didn't work out.
You
then,
didn't like that Go
on.
Steady ring you got her, huh?
I guess not. No. I was a clingy 14-year-old kid, and at the time I was like, I thought we were going to get married. Now, funny enough, years and years later, we ended up getting back together and
Joke's
did get
on
married.
me.
Exactly. But and for the most part, our relationship was pretty good up until the point where we got married, which is kind of a twist on how most marriages work, because after we got married, up until that point, we both had businesses and we dove right back into our business. And that's when we experienced some things that apparently now, after talking to thousands of other entrepreneur couples, other couples in business face as well.
Yeah, exactly. We started experiencing those things like, how do you, when you're working with your partner, how do you stop talking or thinking about work 24/7 when you actually want to be present with each other as a couple? How do you align on kind of the vision, where you're headed, but also the different approaches to getting there when sometimes we have a different idea of what that looks like? How do you give feedback to each other? How do you communicate and not like one person doesn't feel criticized or micromanaged in the process? But basically just like, how do we grow a business in a way that we didn't feel like we were sacrificing our relationship or our health or the other things in life that we truly cared about?
And talking about business,
it sound like in the old marketing world, you found a need that was being unfulfilled and you're filling it.
Well,
exactly.
yeah, because at the time when we were going through this, there weren't any other coaches or mentors or podcasts that were talking about this dynamic. No. So what we felt like we had to do was either sacrifice our business for our marriage, which we didn't want to do because we felt called to marriage and business, or we also thought that, we don't have to sacrifice our marriage for our business, do we? Like, do we have to choose one or the other? And this created a lot of tension and a lot of power struggles for us until one day I remember just being in a guest room of our house, praying out to God, like asking for an answer because we had nowhere else to turn. So I figured I'd turn to my faith. And I remember getting out of that prayer, going on social media and seeing a video that Ariel, my wife, was doing live. And she was in her organic marketing business teaching other moms how to grow and scale businesses from home using only social media. And in the live video that Ariel was doing, there were comments from women all over the world telling her thank you for sharing the wisdom that she had. And for whatever reason, that was the moment where it clicked in my mind. And I said, okay, you know what? Ariel's an entrepreneur. I'm an entrepreneur. At the time, I thought maybe she should be my assistant. But that day, I was like, no. She's not meant to be my assistant. We are both entrepreneurs who have a lot.
I was just going to say, you're the assistant. No.
No, well, not necessarily. Because in that moment, I was like, okay, what would it look like for us to actually take our individual passions and point it towards a unified purpose where we both can maximize our giftedness in entrepreneurship and still maintain a lot of intimacy as a couple. So here's what we did. We just created a whole new path forward, and we started changing the way that we approached our days, our business, our relationship, our schedule, our time. We created new frameworks for this that did not exist prior to that. Now, it didn't happen overnight, but over time, what we started to notice is that our intimacy started coming back. We started feeling more like a romantic partner and less like roommates. In fact, we kind of went back to feeling like each other's biggest fans again. We became much more aligned on where we wanted to go, which is all great. But you know what happened when we took the time to fix our working relationship? Our businesses went from completely plateauing.
Yeah, I think there's like a yin and a yang there. You know, they both got to be kind of connected. If you're
exactly
not happy in your relationship, got to be happy in your work. Well, what are some of the key things you do? And what are some of the key things you do in your business specifically to help couplepreneurs? You know, I noticed you do some seminars and a lot of good outreach methods.
Yeah, well, there's a couple of things. Like when we were starting to work on this dynamic and we started to realize not only our relationship was growing, but also our business was growing at the same time, we started reverse engineering what it is that we did and started sharing it with other couples. That's why we do what we do today, having now coached couples from all over the world. And there are a couple key things that we work on. Number one, we take the time to align on our vision. So one of the fastest ways for entrepreneur couples to get back in right standings with each other, as well as get back that fire and that passion again for their business and each other, is to come together and answer this one question: how can we both get what we want out of life? What does that life look like, and what does the legacy look like that we want to leave behind? So we, inside of our coaching programs, we actually have frameworks to help people get aligned on their vision. That's number one. Number two is we help couples get aligned on their goals. What goals are basically the measurable milestones on the path to making the vision or the dream life a reality. Then once we're aligned on our vision and we're aligned on our goals, the third thing that we help couples do is align on their strategy for business growth. Because once you know where you're going and the measurable milestones to get there, choosing a strategic business strategy that leverages not just your strengths, but the strengths of your partner, that's what allows businesses and couples specifically to grow faster than they've ever grown before. And then the fourth and final piece is once you're aligned on your vision, your goals, and your strategy, that's when it gets really fun to align on your roles, AKA who does what, in order to use the strategy to get more done, to make more in business, and to connect more as a couple.
Now, is this kind of the point you go over, say, like at a seminar, or?
This is maybe one framework out of, I would say, 40 to 50 frameworks that we've developed over the years. But this is from a very high macro level. This is what we could do, because when you align on these four core areas as an entrepreneur couple, all of a sudden everything else in life kind of falls under alignment of these things. Because as a couple, you're not just growing a business, you have a why behind why you're doing it, and you both feel fulfilled maximizing your God-given.
It must be kind of cool to see like the light bulb go on with couples after they've been working with you for a while and they're talking to each other business wise, and you can see their relationships getting a little bit better. I mean, that must be kind of cool to see that all coming together.
Oh yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, let's jump into the heart of what are some key ways to stay on the same page and thrive as an entrepreneurial couple?
Well, I'll start with that. So one of the things that we like to do when it comes to kind of like making sure you guys are aligned in sync is something that we call check-in meetings. Now, we have two different types of meetings that we recommend couples do on a regular basis. The first is like a weekly meeting. That weekly meeting is just designed to kind of look down the pipeline of what's coming throughout the week, whether it's in business, it's in the household, and just determine, okay, with what we have going on this week, who's doing what does the schedule look like, and just making sure that we're on the same page. So that's the first thing. The second is doing check-in meetings. Now, those check-in meetings are a little shorter. They're much more on a daily basis, where you can come together just for 5 to 10 minutes to go, okay, based on what we saw coming down the pipeline this week, this is what we had on the schedule today. Is that still accurate? Did anything else come up? Do we need to adjust anything? And it's just making sure that on a weekly basis as well as on a daily basis, you have those routine checkpoints to make sure that you're both on the same page, you know what's happening. And what that does is it eliminates any unmet expectations, which tends to be what causes tension or conflict throughout.
I'm thinking of something here, like you would think two people living together, it'd be like, okay, we're going to sit down and go over how everything's going and have check-in meetings, but if you don't plan a structure to it, it probably doesn't happen. And then it creates
Exactly.
stress.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, cool. So, you're basically just trying to keep you all synchronized and on the same page and build some structure. I guess it's good anyway to sit down at the beginning of the week or some kind of periodicity and just plan out where you're going.
Yeah, because
And
there's so many
it'll be
things
more
that
effective, the
happen.
two of you.
Exactly. There's so many things that are happening on a regular basis that like what ends up happening is we kind of just like get like head down in doing all these tasks that we forget that we're actually accomplishing these things together and we have an awesome teammate next to us who can help us.
Yeah, and this goes for tasks in the business as well as in the home because you're a team in the home and in the business.
Well, so the old saying goes, men are from Mars, women are from Venus. Well, what is your advice to working together efficiently when you likely have different personalities and different working styles?
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, if anybody listening can recognize that you and your partner are different, I want to challenge anybody listening to recognize that first and foremost as a gift. A lot of times your partner might see things in a completely different light. And I'll give you an example. So I tend to be a little bit more extroverted. My wife tends to be a little bit more introverted. I tend to be wired more towards efficiency. My wife, Ariel, is wired more towards accuracy. I tend to be a little bit more of a director leader type. My wife tends to be a more visionary supporter type. So in any sort of couplepreneur dynamic, you have these different personalities at play. And if we're not careful, these different personalities could actually lead to a lot of conflict because we see things from completely different lenses.
Yeah.
But what we've noticed is that if you can recognize those differences as a gift, almost like when you receive a gift or a present at Christmas time, instead of just taking that present and throwing it across the room and not even opening it, what we give couplepreneurs the opportunity to do is open the gift that is the different perspectives between us and our partner. Now, once that foundation is laid and we see this as a gift, tactically, what this looks like is taking the roles that are required for growing the business in this season and divvying them up, not by necessarily departments, not by necessarily strengths and weaknesses.
Or just strengths and weaknesses.
Right. But something we call energy styles. Now, energy styles is a very specific type of working style that we have developed for entrepreneur couples to help them and their significant other determine what is your energy style, aka the preferred way that you like to work that is in line with your natural ingrained energy, and how does your partner like to work, and where do those things overlap? When we can identify this for entrepreneur couples and we can start divvying up tasks and roles by this, what we do is we take the differences in how we're wired and we actually deploy those differences as strengths in the business.
Sounds like a military operation. Tactical.
Deploy.
When I use the word deploy, it definitely sounds like
getting
that.
in my my ballywick here. Yeah, so it sounds like diversity can actually kind of be your strength
Absolutely.
in a couple. So if you want to actually have different things you're good at, and just you got to figure out how to way to integrate the two of those.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Exactly. And it could cause a lot of friction for a lot of couples, but that's why, we have the privilege of working with couples all over the world to help them figure this out for themselves.
So I imagine there will be occasions when you step on each other's toes as businesses needs and requirements overlap. How do you meet this challenge when there's a little bit of friction?
Yeah. That's a great question.
Yeah. So when it comes to if you're experiencing any confliction or conflict between you as a couple, one of the things that we like to do is always kind of start with like what's happening in the mind, right? And in the mind, usually what's happening is we tend to take the person that we love the most for granted sometimes, whereas some of the things that we used to view as positives, we now start to experience as negatives, things that are frustrating, irritating, things like that.
Sure.
So at first, just kind of distinguishing like, hey, the things that are frustrating you right now that are causing tension, again, are actually a gift, and there's something that can serve you both in the home and in the business. But what else would you say?
I would say too, specifically for anybody who feels like their partner is stepping on your toes, or you might feel like you're stepping on your partner's toes, typically that means that there is a sign of lack of trust happening. There's a lack of trust there because ultimately, if you think about any sort of business environment, if you have a boss that steps in and tries to like take over other people's roles and departments, that is happening because that boss does not inherently trust their team member to do the job well. So what we do with entrepreneur couples is we help them recognize, where is your level of trust right now between you and your partner?
Yeah.
Where is that level of trust? And what can we do strategically and practically to increase your level of trust in each other? So that way you can trust each other to do the things that you assign to each other in the business without having to step on each other's toes.
I got to ask this question. Are couples initially honest about that? Oh, yeah, I trust my yeah, but then it takes a little while to get down to ground truth.
Absolutely. Because I think when we think of trust, we think of like the obvious stuff. We think like, do I trust my partner to not like have an affair? And like, hopefully the answer is yes. But if that's the case, there's more like micro trust that we're talking about. When we say trust, it's really just, is the person that I'm with doing what they say that they're going to do? And do we trust that they're going to do what they say that they're going to do? And it can happen in these little micro trust breaks on a regular basis. Like, for example, if Kyle said he was going to take out the trash and then he doesn't, and then I get frustrated, that is a little micro break of trust, even though he probably didn't intend to. And we all do this, vice versa. We do this all the time where we have these little micro trust breaks that then feed back into, do we expect them to do what they say that they're going to do in the business? Do we expect them to do what they say that they're going to do in the household? And that's where we start to distrust. So instead, we need to kind of like reverse that cycle and start rebuilding. Okay, when my partner says that they're going to do something, they do it.
So little breaks in trust can lead to bigger problems then. Is that kind of like one builds and builds and builds? And
Absolutely.
And the reverse is true too. Once you start acting with an integrity and you show your partner, hey, I could be trusted, and they show you that they could be trusted, this builds trust over time. And slowly but surely you'll recognize that you're just like the entrepreneur couples that we coach, where these couples have so much confidence in each other that it's magnetic to the outside world. That's why so many people call these couples power couples, because they can sense that power and confidence between each other.
Yeah.
Ooh, evolve from couple-preneur to power couple.
That's exactly right.
On the other hand, as a couple, what do you do when like one of the partners feels stuck, doing a task they just don't want to do, or they don't have confidence in, or they need a little help?
Well, there's kind of a decision tree there. The question number one is, can you hire somebody else to do that task? And if the answer is yes, we like to look at overlapped weaknesses or just overlap tasks that couples don't like doing together, and we help them hire out for that position. But I will also say, not everybody is in a position right now to be able to hire. Like, so if you find yourself not necessarily having the capital to hire, there's some other things that you could do as well. Number one, you could look at the tasks that you're doing and ask yourself, based on where I want to go right now, do I even need to be doing these tasks?
Yeah.
So honestly, before we get to delegation, elimination is one of the fastest paths to more success and more fulfillment in business, because ultimately, regardless of what stage of business you're in, from $0 to $20,000 a month in a home-based business, there are only a few core things to focus on that's really going to help you get that. And if you're focused on anything else other than those core things, it could be a waste of time.
Yeah, I imagine like you got to be able to focus on sales,
You got it. Yep.
100%.
Yep. It's 100% all about
and customer
sales.
relationships and
And then 20K and 100K a month, it starts to shift to systems. And then when you're at 100K a month and above, that's when it shifts to scale. So depending on what stage of business you're in, ask yourself, am I focusing on the right things? And if the answer is no, just get rid of it.
Yeah.
That's probably part of that strategic outlook you've got to have. Like, where's the business at, and both be on the same page, with that. Do you recommend like trying to coach each other to get through hard spots, things that there's tasks that they're stuck in?
Sure.
I mean, I sense you sort of saying like move away from it into a delegation or whatever, but is there, you got to reach the point where you say, man, I need to step away from this and not try to push the issue on getting unstuck, or maybe it's just, what battles you pick. I don't know.
Yeah. I'll say, so two things about that. First of all, I will say it is helpful to have a third party perspective in that regard. If somebody's not motivated to do something, if they're not doing something in a specific task, it can be helpful to have a third party that can kind of hold them accountable, which is kind of the part that Kyle and I get to play with a lot of our clients, because if your partner is holding you accountable, that can come across as nagging sometimes. And so there's just a different dynamic there. So being a third party is what helps a lot of the couples that we work with get to do what they actually know that they need to do. So that's the first thing. But what I will say is, if there's a partner that's maybe like unmotivated, or they're not really feeling it, they feel a little stuck. One of the things that we found is whenever there's a lack of motivation or a lack of consistency, it ultimately comes back to a projection of pain. Meaning that person that is quote unquote unmotivated or stuck typically is looking at the task at hand and associating some form of pain with that task that is keeping them from doing it. So for example, if I'll just give a simple example. If I'm struggling to be consistent with going to the gym, right? There's a projection of pain of going to the gym. Either it's going to the gym makes me feel uncomfortable. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm going to embarrass myself, things like that. It could be one example. But so what we tend to like to do is go, okay, if somebody's unmotivated, what is the pain that they're associating with that task? And how can we instead find evidence to support that task can actually be joyful, exciting versus just painful?
And that evidence is where your partner can encourage the other partner who is stuck. And that's what we see a lot, because when you could turn partners into each other's biggest fans again, that's where couplepreneurship becomes fun, not just profitable.
Yeah. That's interesting. So it's a pain point. I never even thought of it that way. When you kind of get stuck in something, so you got to build like a positive association to this kind of builds up another thing. It's just like you all can't always be there with couples. I'm wondering, like, there's couples and couples go to therapy. I'm just wondering if there's if there's room in here for couples, if they need a little extra help, they're going to couples therapy, if any of them take the business aspect of it and work with therapists on that. I don't, maybe that's a whole new genre, but does that ever come up with couples therapy bleeding over, traditional bleeding over into couples in the business?
Yeah. So what we actually say is to our clients, like, we are not couples therapists. There's a degree in which sometimes a couple.
Well, that's what I meant when they go
necessary.
to their own individual couple.
Yeah, but there
therapist.
is bleed over for sure, because at the end of the day, how we perceive our business is usually an overflow of the dynamic of our relationship. So a lot of times when we look at, like, why do we make the financial decisions we make? Why do we make the investment decisions we make? What do we believe is possible, and what type of mental cap are we putting on our potential? All of those things are usually an overflow of what's happening in our personal relationships. And for anybody listening, a really cool phrase that we live by is usually we don't have business problems. We have personal problems that show up in the business. So when we're working with couples, a lot of times we will unravel some hidden resentments or unmet expectations between them. And when we're able to reverse those and get them to associate pleasure with each other in growing the business, eliminating that cap actually eliminates the limit on their potential for growing a business together.
I think we get some good drama there with uncovering all these deeper issues in the relationship coming out in the business. Well, along those lines, we don't want to go from being a romantic couple to business roommates. How do you all keep the fires of intimacy burning in the relationship when it's under, say, a period of deep business stress?
Yeah.
So the first thing I'll say is as simple as it sounds, it's creating the space for intimacy. Now, I'm not necessarily saying you have to schedule it, but what we are saying is that you have to almost, especially when you have a business, and business can be all consuming, you have to kind of plan the business around the personal life and around the relationship life first. So when you create the space, this looks like making sure before you put all of your business commitments on the schedule, you also put a date night on the schedule. You also put time alone individually for you to process the emotions and the sometimes the stress of business individually, so that way you can show up fully for your partner, not just
So you're
exhausted.
recommending doing that first, putting that,
Yes.
planning for that first. Okay.
Absolutely. So yeah, putting a date night on the schedule, putting some individual time on the schedule so you can show up fully for your partner. And then also putting just like time, that may be a date night, but it also could just be time to go have fun together, do things outside of the business that are what attracted you to your partner to begin with, versus just doing all the business tasks together, which can lead to just feeling like roommates or business partners.
Yeah. And we also teach techniques inside of our coaching program to transition couples' minds from thinking about work to thinking about each other when they're present with each other at dinner or on a date night. And there's multiple different transitions that you could do, which is important, because if you're going on a date with your partner, but you're still thinking about the emails you need to respond to, or the accounting you need to do, or all of the fires you have to put out in business, it's hard to really enjoy the moment.
I would think that'd be like the biggest challenge, that 24/7 mentality, the phone always there, and then,
100%.
you're talking about something during the workday, and now you're sitting down at dinner, and what are you going to talk about? Same, but I guess it requires some discipline. I mean, you've got to put some discipline into the relationship.
Sure. Discipline as well as just proven techniques.
Tools,
I'll
yeah.
give you one that has been really helpful that our clients really love. And we call it the treasure hunt game. And anybody listening, you can apply this the next time you're with your partner and you want to be present. We want to challenge you to go on a treasure hunt. What we mean by treasure hunt is when you're with your partner, your number one goal is to find out something about them that you did not know before that moment.
Yeah.
Now, we've done this for married couples, that have been together for decades. And when they apply this, they're able to find out things about their partner that they'd never thought of before. And we call this the treasure because once you find out something about your partner, that is the equivalent of you acquiring the treasure. And I remember the first time I started doing this with Ariel when we were trying to get our minds to stop thinking about work. I went on a date night with Ariel and I sat across the table from her and I just started asking questions about like, what did you like when you were a kid? What were your favorite childhood memories? What are some of the thoughts that you've been thinking lately? What are some of your goals? What's on your bucket list item? And I found out that day that my wife was a Britney Spears fan when she was a kid. Now, I know that's a silly, fun fact, but I was with Ariel at this point for nearly a decade, and I never knew that, even though I was with her almost 24/7. So I want to challenge anybody listening, the next time you're on a date or you want to be present with your significant other, go on a treasure hunt because that is leveraging your curiosity as an entrepreneur to find out more about your partner. And when you're thinking about that, you're not thinking about business.
Oh, that builds in the discipline to get your mind off of business with the treasure. Well, just out of curiosity, I just thought of this. Do you recommend like working together in the same space, or you should probably have different space if you're working in the home?
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think it depends on the couple. I will say for us and many of the couples that we work with, having your own separate space to work is very important because chances are, like we talked about earlier, you work in a very different manner. I know when we work, Kyle, like he likes to hum, he likes to listen to music, he kind of talks to himself, whereas like I need complete silence.
Yeah.
So having two different spaces does kind of create a little bit of that separation throughout the day. So that way you can come together at the end of the day as a couple.
I think it would be a disaster to just be working 24/7.
Right. Yep. Yeah, I do too. Yeah.
My one podcast audience question: what is one thing a podcast listener should do tomorrow morning to better thrive as a couple/entrepreneur?
I would say if there's just one thing that you could do, it would be to go on what we call a vision date with your significant other.
Yeah.
A vision date is where you pick a location that is inspiring to you. And for Ariel and I, this was the beach that we're so very blessed to live right by. And you go to whatever that location is, and you go on a date with your significant other, but the whole focus of this date is to ask each other, what type of lifestyle do we want to co-create together? And what type of legacy do we want to leave behind? Because ultimately, if we can create in this vision date with your significant other a North Star that will guide the decisions that you make in your business and in your home life, that will essentially motivate you and align you on all of the steps and the strategies to accomplish that. And I think if we just get that one thing in place, everything else will come as a result.
I'm talking to you here. I'm kind of learning there's a lot of structure to what you do. There's a structure and steps, and I think that's really good. Touchy-feely things like this, it could end up being just kind of like blaring off in whatever direction. But I think the way that you all have a structure, I think that leads people down the treasure map or the treasure, to get
sure.
To get,
well, and I will say that came from a lot of pain ourselves, a lot of frustration. So what we did is we had to create frameworks and systems and structures exactly. And what we tell people is we've taken the stairs, so that way we can now offer other couples the elevator. If they just use these structures, they could sidestep years of trial and error themselves.
Well, Kyle Ariel, Tresch, we've reached the end of our couple-preneur journey today here on the Home Business Podcast. Are there any other points you'd like to share?
One thing that I wanted to bring up that, it was kind of the last question that you asked about what somebody can do tomorrow. When it comes to couplepreneurs, I think one of the things that comes to mind is wake up tomorrow with gratitude for something about your partner. And it sounds very simple, but I want to kind of say this because, again, usually the things that frustrate us the most about our partner are tied to something that we simultaneously love about them. Yeah. So as an example, if Kyle leaves his socks everywhere across the house, I know that that's also potentially tied to his creative mind that's constantly thinking about new ideas and doing things. And that's something that I love about him. So when I can wake up and go, okay, maybe this is an area that's frustrated me in the past, past, but how is that tied to something that I love about this person? I think it sets our mind right for the morning to view our partner in such a light that we remember why we're with them in the first place.
I love
Kind
that.
of gets back to what you were talking about, having a positive association to things,
Yes,
like with
absolutely.
gas.
Absolutely.
I'll say, well, Kyle Ariel, Tresch, thanks for joining me today on the Home Business Podcast.
Thank you for having us. We appreciate it.
Thanks. To learn more about Kyle Ariel, Tresch and how you can better thrive in business and in your relationship as a couple, please visit kyleandariel.com, our podcast website, for more information on our guests. And what were you saying about that Facebook group?
Yeah, we were talking just before this podcast, and I would love to invite anybody that's listening. We have a free Facebook group that is specifically designed for couple-preneurs. So if you're listening to this and you and your partner own a business, or you want to start a business together, or you own separate businesses, you are who we would call a couple-preneur. And we created the world's fastest growing and I believe largest community of couple-preneurs on the internet. It's called the Successful Couples in Business Facebook group. If you go to Facebook and you search for Successful Couples in Business, you'll see us pop up. Click the link to join, and once we approve you into the group, you'll get to enjoy a bunch of free resources that we have.
Well, Successful Couples in Business on Facebook, and I'll get that on the website also. Well, thanks for joining us for this episode of the Home Business Podcast. Share your feedback with us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, at our website, homebusinessmag.com. Subscribe to our newsletter. For more information, visit homebusinessmag.com or thehomebusinessexpo.com. I'm Richard Kamenderson saying anchors away. We'll talk with you soon. Until then, make it a great couple-preneur building day. Thank you for watching Home Business TV.